Welcome to the Rotary Club of London meeting of Monday, October the 3rd. October in Rotary is Economic and Community Development Month. I am your president, Rick Coates, and delighted to see you all here. At this time, I'd like to invite any visiting Rotarians to introduce themselves. You'll have to unmute and indicate where you are from and your respective Rotary Club.
Thank you so much, Rick. So I am Rotarian Susan Shrestha from Nepal. I am a member of Rotary Club of Lomjung, District 3292, Nepal, Bhutan. And I have been serving as secretary of the club for Rotary year 2021-22, and now I am a member of the club. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other guests that we have at our meeting today that need introduction? Okay, then we'll move on, and I'd like to invite Malcolm Cox to introduce our guest speaker.
John and I were talking at the meeting last week, and we're talking about the work that he's doing in London. We thought it was very important. John, as you know, is a Rotarian. He's the director of the Center of Hope and Salvation Army. And that's all we need to say, because he does great work there for a wonderful organization. So John, it's over to you.
Thanks, Malcolm. You know, it's interesting when you go to a meeting and Malcolm buys you a couple drinks, and then afterwards he asks if you'll speak at a meeting. So I'm not sure how that all worked out, but no, I'm glad to be able to speak about this. It's been a hot topic in the media as of late, and this whole idea of homelessness and what's going on with the homeless population, even more so as we head towards winter and what's going on. You know, the most asked question I get when I'm speaking to groups or individuals is always, you know, how do I respond to those begging for money on the street or for food? And I think the answer I give today is very different than what I would have given 3 or 4 years ago. And I've come to realize that over the years that this is just not a fixable solution. It's just not something that we can just be done with. And, you know, I really believe that it really does take a village. It really does take all of us to respond to this crisis. You know, many people will tell you that in London, we have a homeless crisis. We have an opioid crisis. We have an addiction mental health crisis. And I think they would be very accurate in saying that. But I have to tell you, there's times when I wonder if we really do have a crisis in those areas, or is a more serious issue at hand is the housing issue. And, you know, I'm not going to say that one brings on the other. I think they all mingle amongst each other. And I think that, you know, as we hear more and more things in the media, we start to wonder what really is going on, what's really happening there. And I know when I talked to Jerry a little while ago, I mean, the work that he's doing with the folks who are in the tents and you know, I think we all saw in the paper and the media a while ago that there was somebody who was having a hunger strike until, you know, City Hall changed something and did something different. And you know, we saw in the news this week where 60 faith-based organizations got together to do more discussing because of what was happening at First Baptist with city bylaws, and you know, it just gets to become a bigger and bigger issue. And you know, I think until you know, and some of this came from the Forgotten 519, and I think until we all really sit down together and have these discussions, we're really not going to get very far. And that's really scary to say that, because one would think that we work well together, and I think we do, but we just don't include everybody who needs to be included. It's a much bigger problem than just the churches. It's a much bigger problem than just the city funders, the church. It's a much bigger problem than the homeless coalition. It's, you know, it's a much bigger problem that involves business. It involves housing. It involves such a large group of people that it wouldn't even be smart to have everyone meet together, because you'd have hundreds of people, and you all know what it's like to be in a meeting when you have more than 5 or 6 to get something done. Imagine, and this one meeting I sat in a little while ago in a Zoom meeting, there was over 200 people in the meeting. There was a meeting with LHSC, and I just thought, we will get nothing accomplished with this many people. And sometimes I worry that we get so big with homelessness that I'm not sure how far we're going to get. I think it's important for us to understand a few facts when we talk about this. And I'm probably not going to speak as long as most people. So whoever's the sergeant at arms, you're going to have a lot of fun today. But I think some numbers that we need to understand and hear of what's going on just in our London community is there are over 2,500 people on what they call the by name list. These folks are registered as homeless, 2,500 people. And I'm suggesting there's probably another 500 to 700 people that aren't registered. So in our city alone, my guess is we're looking at 3,000 plus people who are homeless. And I think there's some really good plans out there for homes, but the issue is not whether there's enough homes, it's whether or not they're affordable. And I think people who are working, who make minimum wage, they're struggling to be able to afford housing, let alone those who are on something like, Ontario Works or Ontario Disability or just on the streets living. How do they ever come up with a first and last? We're hearing stories of landlords having people, leave their place and then they jack up the rates to like $1,500, $1,700 for one room place for people to live. We'll never solve this problem as long as housing continues the way it is. We've all been through the last few years of what housing prices went, and people were starting to bid on rentals to get into a rental house. So really tells us the crisis really is in the housing place, and I think it's really something that we really need to be mindful as Rotarians and public at large. So of that population, of that 2,500 that are over 2,500, over 27%, so a quarter of those folks are people who are over the age of 50. So imagine anybody that may be over the age of 50, imagine them living in a tent down by a river or somewhere within the city, whether it be anything, over the age of 50 years old, living in a tent, trying to survive the day by day things of not having food, not having what they need, and just trying to survive what a day looks like. We're fortunate in this meeting. We're sitting here and we're in our offices or at home and thinking, wow, this is amazing. And so when I look at these numbers, I get a little anxious because a good portion of these women, or a good portion of these numbers, 50%, up to 50% of these are women. And this scares me even more so because of the whole street trafficking, the whole women at risk on the street level, women at risk. And, every time I get an opportunity here at the Center of Hope to increase some beds, I have to be honest with you, I'm trying to open them up for women because there's this piece of me that just, when I started here 3 years ago, we had 10 beds for women. We're up to 30 beds now, and it's just nowhere near enough to do what we're doing. And I'm not trying to keep guys out of this, but, all the other shelters are for men. And I'm just trying to think, how do it's hard to live with, to be honest with you, for me, recognizing so many women are on the streets and the dangers that they face each and every day. And so I work with this and I think, okay, so what's going on here specifically at the center? So I'll give you those numbers for London, but at the Center of Hope, over half the people we have registered here, so not 27% it's not homeless, but half of the residents I have in my building, and we can house up to 200 people, are over the age of 50. And, of those numbers, about 40%, about 30% of those. So I could break down ages for you, but I'm not sure that's the important piece. I think the understanding of that this whole idea of homelessness is age-wise wide ranged. I can give you numbers specific to 0 to 15. I can give you numbers specific, that 2,500 numbers I gave you, like over 75 people are over the age of 70 who are homeless in our city. And so, this is what is presently we're facing in this area. And not only are those who are housed, so if I compare to those who are in shelter right now, there's a good portion, I don't have a percentage, but there's a good portion of them who are in need of more care than we can actually offer at the shelter. So there's a big need for us to look at healthcare, to look at what we can do to help those who come in. I have many people here in wheelchairs, on walkers, which we can somewhat help. I mean, our biggest need is to really, what we work on. We have a pharmacy here at the Center of Hope, and London Medical Pharmacy supplies everything for it. They supply the staff for it. They supply the medications. They distribute the meds. And just in the past while, we actually started up in our building a health clinic, primary care, that those who are homeless only can come to our healthcare and get some assistance for stuff like wound care. Like, how many people are on the street that are diabetic, and how many people in our building have needs that are way beyond what we can manage here. But, again, London Medical Pharmacy called us, asked if we would be interested in this. And of course we would, because, putting these folks down at the emergency rooms only creates more system bulking and creates issues, because, if we send some of our folks down to ER, or they go down there, they get discharged to the street. They don't get discharged back here. And so we continue the system issue of where people can go and what we can do and how do we do it. We are now facing even a much different situation with homelessness in London, because as of recent, in the last few weeks, months, we've been informed, and we haven't got this, people are not speaking, but we have busloads of people being dropped off in London that are homeless from other places in Ontario. We don't know where. They're not talking, they're not speaking. They get dropped off, and then they come to us with their suitcases ready for a place to live, and we're full. Every shelter in London is full every day, every time. There's just no more room in the inn. And, the crisis gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the problem is we can't move people out because of housing. So those who are struggling with mental health, those who are struggling with addictions, there's minimal stuff happening for them in many ways within our system within London, but even within the province. So crisis-wise, there's not enough to help those folks who are struggling. And when I talk 2,500 people, I think that's a large number. I mean, we should all be shocked by that. But when I do some comparisons across Canada and the States, I mean, a place like Los Angeles, they have 60,000 people living in tents, homeless. So it just gives you a larger understanding and of what is actually happening across the world today. And, other countries, not just in the States and Canada, but other countries are facing these issues all the time. So for all the work that's being done, I think the organizations are doing the best that they can. I think they're looking at ways in which we can do things differently. I have to say that I'm probably in meetings 4 to 5 times a week, dealing with this one issue of homelessness, of what can we do better? How do we do better? There's a real push from our funder, which is the City of London, and they get their funding through the province, I understand, but it's done through them. And you saw probably last fall the issues that hit the media around budgeting and how much money is going to be spent on homelessness. And we know that there was issues with how where we're going to house people for the winter, right? And so we know that Fanshawe was offered, and we know that the River Road was offered, and somebody burned that building down. Just the reaction of the community and how this all kind of keeps steaming up and bubbling really makes it a challenge. Some places have stepped up. We take a look at some of the churches like First Baptist, who are having folks come in and at least eat and get out of the cold for a while, or get out of the heat. And now air conditioning is built in that room, I understand. And so while places are all doing something, it seems like they're all doing something different. And again, I think we need to be better coordinated in how we do the things that we're doing. I don't know what the answer is to that piece, but I think that until we do that, we are going to face even a different crisis. And I would suggest that crisis would be being unorganized. And I don't think that's good for the folks who are struggling with not having a place to live, those who are struggling with homelessness. So I think there are many groups out there that want to do well, want to do better, want to help more. Funding is going to be a major issue this winter. I was at a meeting over the summer, and the word was, how are we going to do winter shelters and there's no extra money? And so the the money that we had last year, there was more money provided to run the 2 different winter shelters. And what we were told then is there's no extra money. Last year, we were told that shelters were going, so I told, like I said to you, we have 200 people in our residence. Over 100 of them are in the emergency shelter. The city's plan is to continue to depopulate the shelters, which I love the plan, but to do that, you need to have a place and a place for people to go to live, right? And so if we are just going to depopulate and take people out of shelters and nowhere to go, we, again, just add to the crisis that we're in. So there's a lot happening and there's a lot not happening in this whole sector. And I have to tell you, as an executive director here at the center, a good portion of it scares me more than I'm pleased with the direction we're going. And I think that until we can coordinate better, until we can actually figure out what is the finance piece to all this, what is the city providing, what is the province prepared to provide, and what is the Canadian government? What's, what are they prepared to do and offer? We'll read statistics, and we'll hear in the news that London was one of the first cities that took care of veterans, and that at 0, there's no veterans in London that are not housed somewhere. But I have to tell you, I have veterans in the shelter. So wherever you hear your numbers, you're never getting the accurate information. You're never getting everything accurate. And when you question that, people will say, well, I need to talk to that person because that's not true. And again, I think it's just this whole idea of coordination and being coordinated together on how can we do things better. Last Monday afterwards, I talked to Mayor Ed, and I sat on his pandemic crisis team, and I thanked him because being very honest with him, I think he's one of the few politicians, and I said, you're one of the politicians that has done the most for homelessness than I have ever seen across Canada of any other politician. And, even the plan of him to have more houses built and to do this was incredible, that he has taken such a stand. And I know it's one of the number 1 or 2 on the list for London to continue doing this. And I applaud that. But I got to tell you, sometimes it feels like patchwork when I really know it's not, but it takes so darn long to build a place to have then what I think is in many ways an impossible thing, which is called affordable housing. Housing is a great thing, but if it's not affordable, we just make this crisis bigger and bigger. So what's really happening out there is we have a crisis in housing. We have a crisis in affordable housing. We have folks that are getting aged, who are on the streets, living in tents, and the winter's coming. And at this point, there's no solution for them. There's no plan at this point that I've been involved with for winter housing, for winter shelters. There is some money that has come recently that I'm not sure how that's going to be distributed, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And we always start planning our budget in September with the funders, and we haven't started any budget funding yet because I'm not sure that they know what their budget looks like for us to do that in the future. I think it's really important to have not a year-by-year budget plan, but to have a 5-year plan. And if we can get to that, then maybe that will be helpful in terms of understanding our next steps and how do we truly, truly help those who are struggling out there in the streets every night. Every day I come into work on the street here at Bathurst, there's tents up. Not as many as there used to be because there are some folks who are in tents that aren't homeless. But around our place especially, they've used their tents as a business and not necessarily homeless. But we still have many homeless folks staying around here. There's a lot of homeless folks who can't stay in a shelter, and not large numbers, but because of mental health, because of many other issues, there's a fear of losing all you own. And when we see what people bring into the shelter, their whole life is in 2 green garbage bags. That's everything they own. And, to have a fear of that being stolen while they're in a shelter is just enough for them not to come into a shelter. It's enough for them just to find a tent and to live in a tent. So what's it like living in a tent? Well, I can tell you over the years around here, it's been very difficult. It's been very violent. It's been lots of drugs, lots of overdoses. The opioid crisis, the overdosing crisis is alive and well in London for sure, continues to be. At one point, London was one of the highest rates across Canada for overdoses. And those numbers continue to increase. They continue to increase through COVID. And I haven't seen any stats since we kind of started coming out of COVID, but my guess it hasn't changed a whole lot. So we are in crisis, no question, for many of those areas. But until we really can plan and sit down and do some serious planning together, I think this crisis will just get bigger, not better. So I think that's kind of the lay of the land right now, what we're facing in London. And that's just kind of what I wanted to share with you, because I think as Rotarians, you know, I was reading an article once, and the whole idea of you know, what's the solution? Well, we're all part of the solution. We have to be. We just can't say this is something that we have to let other people deal with. I think there's many things that we can do as individuals, as a group, and you know, there's times that I think we can be activists with governments in terms of next steps. What can we do? How do we help? I think the crisis right now, the biggest crisis for us in London, is affordable housing to help deal with this issue. And our opportunity to meet together and work together is crucial to making that happen. So that's what I got for you. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them for you.
Thank you, John. We'll use the raised hand function of Zoom down in the reactions section if you can. Okay, Swani's got the first question, I guess.
Well, first of all, I think it's lamentable that we're losing Ed Holder, and that he's going to another country, but he provided incredible leadership. During my year as president, we gathered some people together, and we determined that one of the biggest needs was homes, and that was when we committed to Nightingale Place, a drop in the bucket to what is needed. And I think it's laudable that we have London South now opened a pantry and refrigerator, and that's in the center of London at St. John the Divine, not a place where you would think you would find homeless people, but it's everywhere. I was wondering, John, where we start with that meeting to get effective action and collaboration. Within the homeless people, with 3,000 or so in our city, are there different populations, those with mental illness, those with addictions, those with literacy and education problems that don't allow them to earn, and then those who have health problems not associated with any of the other things, but don't have the capacity to earn. So I wonder if somehow those people could be streamed to different services and their needs met in the individual ways that they're needed. But what role can we play in bringing people together to start that?
Yeah, great question, Jim. I think there are different streams, no question. There are folks who are homeless that are struggling with mental health. There are some struggling with addiction. There's some struggling with other things going on, physical ailments, all those things. But they all also combine together. You know, that's the struggle. I mean, all those places that help with addiction, let's say, you know, at any given point, the wait list to get somebody into treatment for addiction is 6 months, right? And, you know, the same with getting into a mental health place to see somebody is months. And, you know, when somebody has a breakdown, mental health breakdown, and they go to the hospital, they could be there 24 hours, but when they release them, they're released back to the street. And, you know, this continues to be that cycle that's just not healthy for anybody. And so what can we do? I think as individuals, we can, you know, it's kind of like, you know, I said the question earlier that, you know, what my answer to what do we do with those folks who are on the street? You know, 3 years ago, I would say, well, you know, to donate to organizations, because funding's a horrible place right now. Donate to places that are helping these folks. Donate, you know, and that person, like, you know, that person, and you know, but I changed my mind today. You know, my response today is, I look at the folks who are homeless right now in a very different lens. And the lens I look at them with is, this is my neighbor. This is my neighbor. And, you know, people ask me all the time, what do I do? I said, how would you treat your neighbor? Because honestly, 3,000 people in London, we need to be responsible as these are our neighbors. So what would we do? So I tell people, if you see somebody on the street who's begging for money, maybe take them out for lunch, maybe buy them lunch and talk to them, right? They're this invisible group. And unless we as people who live here in London, sit down and have that chat. I mean, Jerry, you could probably speak to this as well, because you're doing that every day in the tents. Like when you go out, you're talking to these folks. And I got to tell you, they all have a story. And they're all great people that we sometimes hesitate. I'll give you a quick thing. I'm just preparing something, but it just reminds me of the Good Samaritan, right? How people just pass these folks by. And I think our responsibility is not to pass people by. And it's to engage in conversation, it's to engage communities together on how do we help and support. And I think the more we get to learn individually how we do that and what people are actually going through, to listen to a story, to feed into a discussion with them, you make them and you give them dignity, which they don't have and don't feel that they have. And some of them feel they're not worthy of having. But the more we engage these folks, the more dignity we provide them. And I think that's a big spot that we can all be involved in, Jim.
Jan, you had your hand up right after Swanee. So did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. John, if there was the money, how could it be spent? Because you say affordable housing is the problem.
Yeah.
And there's housing, there is some housing, but none of it is affordable. And how can you possibly fix that?
Well, I think that needs to become a very political stance that we will provide affordable housing, right? I'm concerned about the houses on South Street, to be honest with you, that there's going to be enough affordable housing. There's going to be housing, but whether or not there's going to be enough affordable housing will be the issue. And I think it takes someone like an Ed Holder politically to be able to stand out and say, we need to provide this, and not allow landlords to kick folks out who are struggling to make a payment, and to not allow them to jack up their rents. And I get it, it's a business. So, I mean, they need to live as well. But, we're hearing of landlords increasing their rent by 3 times because they can get it, right? So they'll kick someone out so they can increase their rent 3 times of what they're getting. So they may be getting $500. Now they can get $1,500 in the same place. And so that's the affordable piece. And I think it's going to take a real serious political approach to saying, we won't tolerate this any longer. We have to provide affordable housing. Part of the problem for people, even in shelters, is, those folks who are on OW, to live in a private room here, it costs $500, but that includes meals as well, right? The problem is if that comes out of their Ontario Works, that only gives them $89 for the whole month for their own needs. Everything else, $89. So imagine if you could pay your rent and eat your 3 meals, can you survive yourselves on $89 for the month? Right? And when we start looking at those for ourselves and what people are facing, those are the wins that we face every day. And that's what they're facing. And they would rather stay in a tent because then they don't pay the rent. And then now they have, a few $100s to spend on themselves for toiletries, for other things and so on. So, yeah.
Malcolm?
A bit more of a comment here, John. Jan had mentioned if there was money available, and I guess this really is a political thing. The Highway 413 that the Premier wants to build is going to cost $8.2 billion. And just think what you could do with a part of that for some of the solutions in London. So I don't know how you get a message. Maybe Jerry knows a bit more about that. How do you get a message to a politician to say, you could be pretty popular and by doing good things as opposed to just pouring concrete?
Wow, what a statement.
You have an answer, Jerry? I'd like to hear it too.
No, John, I would love to get together with you. Actually, honestly, I could talk about this for honestly 5 hours without exaggeration. I've been even now, it's much more difficult for me now. And there are groups that are reaching out to me that I started to work on something 14 months ago. And they're telling me, can you please get this meeting still going with the minister? And I tell them, I will try, but realize one thing, I'm nobody now. All I'm is a concerned citizen. But even in the meantime, with Minister Clark, Minister Jones, and there is, in terms of Malcolm, what you were saying, the money for the highway, there are certain things that don't even, common sense doesn't make sense anymore at the level. And you got Ministry of Health that's funding the beds for mental health in the hospitals, which is double the price. And we are paying for that, where we could go to the organizations like local, for example, Indwell, which is less than half. And guess what? It's not paid by the government, and we could be saving 50%. So there is honestly, John, I would love to, because we have a lot of, I think, same ideas. This, you have it from one perspective, I have it from the other. Would love to get together with you. And if I do get elected anytime in any position, I think it was Jim that, Jim, I think you told Ed that he's the politician who has done most for the homelessness. If I do ever get elected, I hope you are going to change it, and it's going to end up being me, because I want to attack this really badly.
Bob Early.
Yes, thank you. I tried to get into last week's meeting, so I missed what Ed said. But I remember back in May that Joan Atkinson, Sister Joan, was talking about the frustration of getting the affordable housing groups together. And picking up on a couple of your comments, John, I just hope that they're not busing people in like they are from Texas and Florida, out of Toronto and Windsor and Ottawa and other places. And the street people, I try to give them a Timmy's card or a coupon that I win at a game or whatever. But I guess it's kind of a frustrating thing. Is there something that service clubs in general, if we bind everybody together, we got enough clout to help this? And the affordable groups, I think, like London Affordable Housing, they just need some seed money to then get the rest of the financing in place to do a project. And as you say, it takes a village to make this accomplished. I'm living downtown, and it's kind of a mixed reaction I have. As I sometimes fear for safety of maybe not myself being as big as I am, but others around me, when I see people that are walking around and cursing immovable or invisible people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a big issue that is reality. London is trying to bring a lot of people downtown and have a focus, but we've got to deal with this, or we're not going to do it. So I don't know if there's a question in there, or just a bunch of unjoined comments, but that's my thoughts.
I think they're good thoughts, Bob. And I think, the more visible we make this, the more places struggle as well. So, the more that we talk about this, it's kind of like the stigma of mental health seems to be doing better than it did 10 years ago because of the discussions. I think we're stuck in that place right now around the stigma of homelessness. And the more that we're bringing this out in the open, and even physically, you think over the summer when, Victoria Park was used for a lot of the homeless when it got too hot in the building, the suggestion was go to the park under a tree, we'll bring you food there. And then there was this issue with the downtown businesses, right? And it's the same thing. Some businesses, I have to shut my doors because people just walk in and it's dangerous. And it can be. I mean, it honestly can be. I mean, in the past around the Center of Hope, and I'll be real honest with you, people were dropping off baseball bats to each tent so they could protect themselves. We've had knives, we've had guns here, we've had all those things that you think of. And some of it seems non-imaginable, but it's imagine it because it's happening. And so, some of these tents are used to be just dealing drugs. Some of these tents are used to be providing protection for people. Like, it gets this reputation, which is really unfortunate because there's many people who are living in tents because they just can't afford to. And people who struggle with mental health, they struggle to keep up in a place to live. So those who struggle with mental health will struggle to pay rent on time. They'll struggle to do this. And as soon as they don't, the landlords will kick them out. over COVID, and to be honest with you, it was a bit of a blessing because they weren't allowed to kick people out. They weren't allowed to do that. But as soon as that kind of stopped, we're seeing more and more people being asked to leave. We, at our place here, we also have a program. It's called the Housing Stability Bank. Folks who are living in a place that struggle to pay a rent 1 month or a hydro bill, they can come to us and we'll actually give them the money to do that so they don't get kicked out. Those funds start to run low, and so there's grant money and there's loan money, and the loan money is very cheap. I think they pay $25 a month to pay it back over 2 or 3 years. And to be honest with you, if after they paid half of it back, we forgive the rest. So, there are some programs that are very beneficial to keep people out of being homeless, but those funds start to run out as well. And again, I'm not sure what the city's going to do with that program in the future. And we're working with them on what this looks like and how we're going to budget this. They would like to see it all grant money, which is great, but I think we would run out before the end of the year. And, the money that people pay back also gives them, to be honest, it gives them some dignity that they're paying back a loan. $25 a month, they can do that and they feel good about doing that. And then we, take the half, once that half is paid off, we just forgive it at that point and they can move on. And they feel so good about staying in a home. They feel good about being able to pay the $25 a month, which may sound strange for some folks, but it's not to them. They're doing this because they feel good about doing that, and it's giving them dignity which they deserve.
Thank you. We'll take one more question. Bud Loughlin.
John, please help me understand how affordable housing helps most of the people that you've been talking about.
So the problem, but is that if you can get somebody that's housed and they can afford to pay for rent, then they have dignity. They can do other things as well. So they can survive. If they can, in some affordable housing, be like if the rent was $500 and there's a help to make it affordable, which means some people pay $150 a month instead. That gives them money to also then contribute to society, contribute to the public, and they feel good and they have dignity themselves about being able to do that. And I think that's a really big issue, that this whole idea of homelessness, people lose their dignity. And to me, that's the biggest loss. When people can't have a place to live, imagine living in a tent for 6 months, 7 months. It's hard to have dignity when you're living that way. And so when you can afford to be in a place, I mean, you think, as our kids grow up, they want to have their own place. They want to move out of mommy and daddy's house and they want to have their own place, right? That gives them dignity. And people who have been in the workforce for many years and then they lose their job and then they end up homeless, they lose their dignity. And this is to provide something so they give back to society, they give back to, and they feel good about who they are, and they start contributing again back to things. And that if you can get into affordable housing, then you can also build on your own income because you have a place that you feel safe, you feel secure, which is big in homelessness. People need to feel safe, they need to feel secure. And when you feel safe and secure, you feel dignified as well. So I think those are all pieces to it.
Okay, Jerry, you are absolutely the last question.
I was just going to add, in terms of the affordable housing, I think that potentially there are two things talked about. And sometimes when you hear politicians saying that the affordable housing is going to resolve the situation on the street with homelessness, it's not always very accurate. And yes, it will help what John said, young people to, instead of paying $2,000 a month, they pay $1,500, whatever. But it's the concern is the deeply affordable housing for the people who are homeless, and we can provide this. And I think that that's the more important question, and for us to come with the strategies to kind of bring this people under the roof so they have roof over their heads. But I just didn't know what you meant. I just want to clarify this because sometimes the affordable housing and deeply affordable housing for homelessness, sometimes people get confused. And as I said, politicians, they pat themselves on the shoulder saying, we pushed on this developer 10, 20, 30 affordable housing units, and that's going to resolve the situation on the street. Not likely.
Well, John, I want to thank you very much for your presentation today. It's always great to have a fellow Rotarian talk about their expertise to club members and that, and you certainly have an expertise that we appreciate. So you've seen this before, but because of your presentation today, the Rotary Club of London has made a contribution to the Polio Plus campaign of the Rotary Foundation to immunize 50 infants against polio. Because of you, Rotary is one step closer to a polio-free world. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay. Now, we've got announcements. Randy Harden is first.
Yes, Gary Purble, Warren Granger, and myself worked at a bingo on the 27th. Very successful. We deposited $4,700 at that time. Anyways, it was a good night.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to the other Rotarians that worked that bingo, Jerry and Warren. The next bingo is on Sunday, November the 6th. And I will be sending out an email before that bingo to look for volunteers. I might add that I'll be able to go out to that one, and I'm looking forward to being able to go out and help the bingo team in person. Don Bork has an announcement.
Yes, so in the next couple of hours this afternoon, everyone will be receiving an email with a link for a updated club survey, kind of following up on the changes that we made approximately 6 months ago in changing the when and how and where the club meets. This is not going to be as long as previous surveys. This one should definitely take less than 5 minutes. You will get that survey today and another reminder next Monday, as we will be closing the survey at the end of the day next Monday, so that I can roll up the results on Tuesday so that we have them ready for our next board meeting. So watch for that, and hopefully no one has any challenges filling in the survey.
Thank you, Don. Jim Swan.
Yes, it's at least a little bit of help if we attend the kettles for the Salvation Army. And we still have a number of shifts open, but thanks to Rick Coates, Steve Knox, Randy Harden, Randy Warden, Bud Laughlin, and John Aberhart, David Brady, Malcolm Cox, and Ken Forbes and Diane Twinstra, we have filled some shifts. But if you have a couple of hours on November 25th, December the 2nd, 9th, 12th, 13th, 14th, or 15th, we'd like you to have a look at the shift sheet. Now, because there's a survey going out, I won't mass email this shift until later in the week. But when I do, if you'd have a look at it, and if there's any way that you can fill some of the shifts still available, we'd like you to do that. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. Diane Twinstra has not got a date yet for the next London Food Bank volunteer evening of our Rotary Club. So she will be sending out an email once she knows the date that they have assigned for our club. She does want Rotarians to know that the food bank will be looking for volunteers this year to assist with food collection at this year's Santa Claus parade. So Rotarians should keep this in mind for the near future. Further communication will come out regarding this. What we do know is the Santa Claus parade is on November the 12th. So there will be a communication looking for volunteers to sign up before that date. So just keep it in mind, and hopefully you're able to come out and help in that effort.
Rick, could I get a moment for the Christmas market?
By all means.
Thank you. Fellow Rotarians, in case you've been following it, the Christmas house that was in Springbank Party Stand, Victoria Park, has now found a permanent home in the Rotary Rink Square on the northeast corner. And in doing so, the market wants to put on a Christmas market, which will entitle about 30 to 40 booths for people to show their wares. the Rotary Clubs of London will have a booth. And is there anybody in our club who's interested in working that booth? And if any ideas of what you'd like to sell or advertise there during that time? Now, I understand this is through the, at the same time that Jim has his Christmas kettles going, because this is between December the 2nd and the 18th. And the times would be, these would be at Thursdays, Fridays, Saturday, and Sundays, between basically 12 and 7 at night. So if anybody has any interest in this, would you kindly send me an email and I'll pass it on to the people who are working this with the other clubs. And you could also help the other clubs who are marketing products. I think London South is going to be marketing their Christmas ornaments there. So if you have any interest, please send me an email and I'll get you looked after. Thanks, Rick.
You're welcome, John.
Okay,
Okay, just a reminder that our next meeting is an in-person dinner meeting on Monday, October the 24th at the Highland Golf Club. Registration and fellowship from 5:30 to 6 p.m. and the dinner buffet at 6 p.m. Our district governor, Mike Chaffee, will be our speaker. You'll receive a notice to register for this dinner meeting about a week before the meeting. As I close this meeting, I want you to imagine what the Rotary Club of London can do in the next year. Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.